fact, send the invite out to full board of, in this context, full board of ed and town council.
Yeah.
It frankly slipped my mind, so we just sent it out to the committees and staff to support. But that's certainly a good thought going forward.
Yeah, no, I agree.
All right.
All right, so we are live on YouTube. We should see folks potentially start to view it.
Yeah, we don't have everybody on.
Yep, I figured at 3 o'clock we'd send it up.
So who else? Sarah and April, right? And Sandy.
And Betsy, I believe, right?
Betsy, yeah.
Thank you.
There was an extra step for me that I wasn't expecting. I had to create an account under my Scarborough ID.
Yeah, me too.
That might
Yep.
catch.
You won't have to again.
Yeah, so that's the town basically now has a Zoom account. So as you log in, you get pulled into that account together, and then we can assign different levels of basically access as well as feature sets for the folks that use it.
Awesome.
Yep.
Sarah.
Hey guys,
Hey there.
I think the others are having just a little bit of trouble, so hopefully we can give them a few minutes.
Okay.
There's April.
Do you want to start, Peter, or do you want to give it a few minutes? We are, again, for everyone who just tuned in, we are broadcasting live on YouTube right now, so mind yourself.
So is
We
everybody,
are on the World Wide Web right now. So
is everybody here, or are we expecting Sandy too?
I think Sandy was planning on being on, but I know he was going to go on from home.
Okay. All right. So maybe we should get started. Hopefully Sandy will join us. Tom, would you have some instructions just about logistics and other stuff? And
Yeah, I do. I've asked Tristan Snyder is one of our newest IT staff and is kind enough to help set this up and going to be a bit of our moderator today. So I thought it'd be helpful that he could explain kind of what we're doing, the different platforms we're using, and also how we're going to receive public comment. And I should preface all of this by saying this is the first time for all of us, so bear with us, particularly with the public piece. So Tristan, you want to give us just a basic overview?
yeah, sure. So essentially there are two technologies involved here. One, obviously the meeting glue is Zoom. So that's what you're all connecting to. Recently, we've had a town account purchase that we can assign licenses to get more features, as well as facilitate recording. And the second piece, which is streaming up to YouTube. So there is a stipulation where in order to facilitate public comment, anything that is discussed here be restreamed up to YouTube. And then in that forum, on that public side, folks can post comments and sort of inject different commentary that they might have along the way. So typically you have public comment there, item 4 on the agenda. That will be sort of an amalgamation of YouTube comments that I will moderate and then feed up to the panel here. And then at that time they can be read. And then, if there is any, Tom was informing me that there's not typically a dialogue that happens, but if there is any sort of response, obviously they'd have access to it because they can see you discuss it. So it's like one-way virtual inclusion for them. And then they can see their comments get picked. And for folks that are viewing out on YouTube, I'll have numbers here in a second if we do have anybody that is live. One of the requirements would be that you provide your address and then whatever comment that you'd like the panel to hear. So
Yeah, so I just want to be clear, Tristan, you're not going to be picking and choosing. You'll be pulling together and providing all of the comments as they were
Correct.
provided to you. We'll read
Yep.
them aloud, and if the committee wants to discuss and even respond to them, we would do it within this group. So it's not going to be interactive with the commenter, if you will.
Right, exactly. So folks will be asking a question. It will not be a direct response coming from the town's YouTube account. It will then be sort of brought up towards the end of the meeting. And then at that time, whatever they have produced, I won't be picking and choosing, but whatever they have produced will be read out, and then it can be responded to and reacted to.
So Tristan, if you could kick that off by starting that chat and giving instructions to folks how they could submit a comment, that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
In case anybody else was trying to cheat, I just tried to pop over to the live broadcast and there's a few second delay. So it was confusing for me because I was hearing echoes.
Oh.
In case my eyes were rolling.
That's not per FCC regulations, so we still need to be, that is live, though it's delayed. So Peter, just two other points if I could, and then I'll turn it back to you. My intention with this meeting is really to talk about budget process and schedule. We had a defined schedule that has been upended, to say the least. And I'd like to bring forth to the group for conversation a way to kind of restart it in a slightly different form. And then as quickly as we can return to that schedule that we had published and we think we can still work toward. And then for your purpose, and I'm sure the Board of Ed, they need to be thinking about how they're going to conduct their review process. They're all going to have to be virtual meetings, in my opinion, at least for the next 4 to 6 to 8 weeks, I'm guessing, at least in the initial meetings for sure. So I think to be thoughtful around how you use your review time would be a real important part of the conversation. So with that, I turn it over to you, sir.
Thanks, Tom, for the maiden voyage, huh?
Yeah.
Just kind of formalities, just calling it to order. Both the finance committees of both the Board of Education and the town are here and present. And I think Tom has framed up the discussion issues, but Tom, before we started, a couple things might be helpful. I mean, one, it's just really unusual times with everything that's going on. There's just a ton of uncertainties. Can you just, there's some confusion just about the sequence of events and timing. So if for some reason we can't convene or come to a conclusion, and I guess probably the question might be, are we even going to be able to do an election in June, a ballot in June? Because of not going to have to control entry into the spaces if this prevailing. So that's still doable, you think?
Well, I don't know. Secretary of State has not given any guidance that I'm aware of, but that's certainly an issue that we need to pay attention to. I would suggest, though, that we should assume that that's going to be possible, whether it's by absentee or otherwise, and should come up with some sort of process and schedule to get us to that point. And at this point, unless I'm told otherwise, I think we ought to use June 9 as the target date. That's the primary election day.
Yeah, and just as a framework, though, if we can't, for whatever reason, if we can't get there by June 9th, or we can't have that first referendum for whatever reason, what budget goes into play? If you don't do a presentation, do the existing budgets roll forward until we are able to?
That's a good. What I can tell you for sure is the charter says they tasked myself with proposing a budget. The school has a component of that, and I don't exert any influence over that. So what they give me, I put together and submit a whole budget. In that scenario, the council has 60 days to act on that budget. If you fail to, for whatever reason, or choose not to, the budget I present is what becomes the budget for the following year. So I'm not answering your question exactly, and I'll have to look at the charter as to what happens if I don't even submit a budget.
Yeah, that's what I was at. Just trying to get the landscape of where we are. I had thought it was something. If you do submit the budget to us, that's the one that prevails. If we don't act on it, if we don't get to that point, then I think it's the existing budgets that roll forward. But I'm not sure of that. But it's not.
Well, with the recent guidance and authorization from the legislature, there's no reason we can't get. There's no reason I can't submit one. And there's no reason the council can't adopt one. It's a matter of what process we're able to undertake between now and then is the question. But I think you know, the town council and the Board of Education and all of your committees are able to function in full capacity remotely at this point.
Okay.
Just as an aside, the two requirements are the public needs to be aware, so the same public notice requirements. They need to be able to participate. And Tristan's talked about how we're proposing to do it, at least for this one. And the last item is all votes must be recorded by roll call, so it's clear as to who's voting on what. But beyond that, you're able to function as though you're all sitting in the same room.
Okay.
But Tom, that's new to me, and just want to make sure I understand that there can be votes taken as long as they're roll call votes and everybody's present electronically.
Yes.
Oh, that's super helpful.
Yeah, I'll send you the legislation so you can circulate it around. But yes, that was just last week as part of the omnibus legislation that's
A
passed.
big bill that I didn't get all the way through.
Right.
Also,
Peter-
I think if the council does adopt a budget, then I think if we can't go forward in terms of the validation vote, I think the council's budget moves forward, correct?
We'll get answers to all those scenarios. Yeah, I should have been prepared for that.
So I think the validation really just impacts the school budget. I mean, aside from we might take it from the town side if it doesn't pass, but I think the default is if we do nothing, I think the legislation that recently went out was that the current budget could carry forward. If we begin the process and put out a budget, then I think that's what would carry forward.
And from the school side of things, we've already gotten guidance in regards to if the budget process were to slow down and the town wasn't able to, you know, get through that process by June 30th. And the guidance that we're receiving is that in a similar way, we would be working under this year's budget until that process got finalized.
Yeah, it presumes that ultimately there will be a new budget that's approved. Diane's quite right. Now that I hear her say that, the law talks about the scenario by which the budget is delayed, but
Right,
it presumes that there will be a new one adopted at some point.
right.
So that's great. So with that backdrop, Tom, maybe you can walk us through sort of as you've looked at it and thought about it, what
Sure.
what you're proposing is something that's doable and might make sense.
Yep. Tristan, can you share the screen and put up the calendar?
Absolutely.
So he's pulling up the master calendar. It's fairly busy, but while he's doing that, I'll just introduce it. In this day and age, with school validation votes required, we really work backward from that primary election date. It's the second Tuesday in June. This year it's June 9. And so that's really the piece that we work back from. We're in a position to have second reading accomplished at the second meeting in May for the council. I believe that's the 20th. So if you scroll down just to the calendar. So there's a lot on here, but the critical dates for the budget process are obviously the presentation, first reading, public hearing, second reading, and validation. And so working backward from June 9, that puts us in a position to have the budget adopted by the council at their meeting on May 20th. That leaves, you know, not a huge absentee period, but an ample one, and one that we've generally used in the past. And so, you know, we've always allowed for 5 to 6 weeks for the town council and its finance committee, and then the Board of Education as well, to kind of review the budget. And that's an area that may be able to be compressed. It's going to require support on the part of all of you if that's what happens. But my goal is to really not upset that schedule much at all. And so we were scheduled to present the budget on April 1st. And I'm suggesting that Sandy and I do that just a week later, perhaps on the 8th. And then that would put us in a position at the next council meeting on April 15th. We could do another presentation if that serves a purpose. But I would be suggesting and asking for first reading on that night. And just to speak to that, the goal over the last couple of years has been to separate presentation and first reading by at least a week, so folks have time to review the documents and they feel better informed before they're asked to take a vote. So this approach respects that and really very quickly kind of gets us right back on the schedule. We're essentially losing a week, and I would suggest we lose the week in the review period and stay firm on all the other dates. Does that make sense? Now, this all assumes, at least on the 15th of April, a virtual meeting of the town council. And I've not talked to council leadership, but I'm going to strongly advise that we do whatever we can with what the tools we have to continue to conduct the business of the town.
Now, Peter, you've been here in the past. Do you think that presentation a week before first read is something that is beneficial given the circumstances, that we should try to do it again this year, or do you think they could be combined?
I think if there's a way that we could do it that way and separate sort of the presentation from the first read would be helpful. I think, Tom, I mean, you've probably got a better sense since we have moved to doing that. Does that seem to have worked better than previously or not?
I think I would say yes in the eyes of the elected officials. It doesn't really make a difference for me per se, but I know the comfort level of some town councilors is much greater than the old method of asking you to vote the same night you hear it. So I think to the extent we can, that's an easy lift for staff to do. I'll speak, Kate, you can speak for yourself, but this last week and a half has thrown us all a bit of a curveball, and so I could desperately use another week to put the final touches on the budget, for sure.
Yeah, it's certainly, as far as getting the budget finalized, I think we're, on the school side, we're a tiny bit ahead of the town, only because we had anticipated having school board budget workshops this week. So we have been making some tweaks still, and we will continue to make tweaks between first and second reading. But we're still trying to figure out how to get those budget workshops back on track, and having extra time to make that happen would be really helpful for us.
Right. I think that is the piece that we are now behind on, because our building leaders and district leaders really spent the last week and a half kind of retooling and recreating what education could look like. And so we had to defer the budget workshops that we were supposed to have tomorrow and Wednesday, so that we could be laser focused on that education piece. So we're still looking to see when we can reconvene to provide that information to the school board. And they need to be able to hear that before they can take it to first reading at the school board meeting as well. So right now, I think it's a matter of figuring out if it is plausible for us to have that first reading at the April 2nd school board meeting or not. And Sarah, I don't know if you've had conversation with Leanne about that.
Yeah, so just to add a little bit more to that. So we obviously haven't discussed this as a full board, but I did have a conversation with Leanne prior to this meeting. And as Diane said, one of the most powerful components of the budget process are the workshops. It's really where we sort of understand what's in it. And those sessions are, 2 4-hour sessions. So we're likely going to need to pare those down and figure out how we do that sort of in a virtual setting. But Tom, I guess the other proposal I would put on the table for discussion is giving our leadership council an extra week, and also the board an extra time to sort of look at their calendars and move some things around so that we could do the workshops, those 6th, 7th, or 8th possibly, with the that would put we would have a school board special meeting then on the 9th, and that would be our first reading. And then the town council first reading would be on the 15th And then from the 16th, we would just kind of pick up our normal schedule. So the 16th would be the first public hearing at the school board meeting.
Yeah, that would work equally well. Just appreciate that, delaying the start, if you will compress something, whether it compresses the review period between first and second, or compresses the absentee voting period, or a bit of both. And I think all of that is doable, and it's up for discussion. Just so everyone appreciates, there's really parallel approval processes that go through. I'm selfishly thinking only of the councils. I don't mean to minimize the school's adoption process. I think per charter, it's really the council's adoption is what really controls. But I think it's hugely helpful for the Board of Ed as a body to be deliberative in its process and ideally take those votes before the council does. I think that sends a very clear signal as to what the Board of Education as a group thinks. So to the extent that we can keep that parallel path in the sequence that works, makes a lot of sense.
I think we were, sorry, go ahead, John.
So would the school department also be able to present on the 8th, or was that, we're not sure that they were going to be ready at that time? I'm not
No,
clear.
I think that would be the plan, would be the Sandy and Tom presentation on the 8th, the school board first vote on the 9th, which would be a special meeting for us. And then you guys have your first reading vote on the 15th with the public hearing the 16th. So it gives a week between the first public presentation and the town council vote. It doesn't give a week between the school board vote, but ideally we would have had a couple days, if not more than that, from our workshop to sort of distill that information and prepare for a vote on the 9th. And I guess just before we go any further, I'm one member, so I don't know if April and Alicia want to comment or sort of disagree or challenge that approach either.
Sir, could I ask a quick question? So what were you proposing for the workshops, or the one, or at least one workshop for the school board?
I think we need to work that date. Diane and Sandy need to work that date out with the leadership council because they were originally scheduled for this week. I guess all I was suggesting is that it seems, so the original schedule was for 2 4-hour sessions. Just given that we'd be doing them remotely, I think there's probably an opportunity for us to pare that down into either one session or 2 shorter sessions. But that's really kind of a conversation for Diane and Sandy and Kate to have with the team. But we would need to have, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I don't want to minimize the importance of those. I think they're hugely important, great educational value, and I encourage you to do it. But from a pure legal and adoption point of view, they aren't required, so to speak. So again, I'm not dismissing the importance of that. I encourage you to do that and find a way to work that in. But just appreciate it. To my way of thinking, it's not a required part of the adoption process.
I think the one thing we were focused on, Tom, a little bit was trying to ensure that the board had a first reading before the council did. Because, we've all looked at that language and statute and in the charter about the board providing a budget to the town manager. And, we're sort of trying to be faithful to the intent of that and have an actual proposed budget for the school a little bit before the council takes up the full budget. So that's part of our thinking as well.
Agreed.
So this is Peter. I guess I may not be tracking. So Sarah and others, are you saying what Tom has proposed, an April 8th budget presentation works or doesn't work? Or are you suggesting you actually want another week?
I'm suggesting we want another week. I'm suggesting that we're not going to be prepared to do the first reading on the 2nd.
But if we present on the 8th, would the school board be comfortable taking action that following night on the 9th in first reading?
I guess I'll speak for myself. And then, like I said, I want April and Alicia to comment. Obviously, none of this is ideal, but I think we could make that work, assuming that we had the workshops. I think what the workshops give us in this sort of tightened scenario is just that context and that sort of information that we need and the opportunity to ask questions. So I would really push for us to continue to have those as part of the budget process. I also think that it's the first opportunity for us to really tell the story to the public.
Oh, shoot, sorry. It's time to get the kids from the bus stop, except it's not. I kind of feel like we're at the discretion of the staff is where I'm kind of at. And the school board hasn't, because all of this is brand new, the school board hasn't had an opportunity to have our own finance committee meetings. And so I'm hesitant to say whether or not I think the board could be ready or whether I could be ready to vote, not knowing what I don't know. And so at this point, you know, I really would need to hear from Kate and Diane and Sandy in terms of what they think is a reasonable timeline. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Kate, Diane, do you think you could hold, even if it's a modified approach, but hold those workshops sometime before the 9th?
Yeah, I think, you know, Kate and I talked with Sandy about that earlier today, and I think we feel comfortable being able to hold those before that time. I think the question really goes back to the board in terms of, you know, their comfort level with that joint presentation going out before, you know, the board has an official endorsement or adoption of the school board budget.
So what I'm seeing as a potential timeline is even if we give the leadership team an extra week beyond next week for the workshops, we would be talking about doing the workshops perhaps on the 7th and 8th of April. We could have a special meeting for school board on April 9. The presentation would be happening just before the school board votes. So I'm not sure if that bothers us or if that's fine. I mean, as everybody keeps saying, we're kind of winging it here. So
right,
whatever works is good.
I think what's really of the most priority is that the board has a chance to see the full budget. And I think that we can definitely make those workshops happen in advance of April 8th.
You know, it's not ideal. This is first reading, and so it really initiates the process. And I don't mean to minimize the importance of that, but by the same token, it's not a final vote by any stretch.
Correct. I think we understand that.
Yeah, and actually, if again, maybe going back, Tristan, can you go back one slide that has Tom's outline? I think it's one slide back.
Yeah.
So I think what's proposed here is the 8th would just be, and I think in the past, Tom, that has just been without a whole lot of discussion, just the consolidated budget sort of reported out, right? In the form.
Yeah, exactly. Usually the superintendent and I share that presentation, and there's really no comment either. It's just, it serves as a launching point.
And it's pretty high level as well. There's
Right.
not an enormous amount of detail to it.
I mean, I do actually physically hand you the copy of the budget as well. We should talk about that at some point too, that this might be the year that we go digital entirely.
Yeah.
But put a pin in that. We'll come back to that before. But you're right. It's typically just the presentation of the budget. There's no deliberation. There's no discussion typically. It just initiates the process.
And so, and then, you know, it sounded like the Board of Education might be able to do something on the 9th. So what might be interesting, which is another part of the conversation today, it's going to be a completely different environment we're in with everything that's going on. Who knows where we're going to be 2 or 3 weeks from now with everything we're dealing with here. I don't know if you guys saw, they just got a case. BIW decided to keep folks at the workplace, and there was someone just diagnosed today with the virus, and people from all over Maine go to BIW. I mean, people as far as Farmington commute down. So it's kind of a changing environment. It might give us our first good feel on the 8th to see where we are with the numbers, because I suspect there's going to be lots of angst in our community around people, you know, without paychecks. A lot of the restaurants have closed and other things. So that would give us an early peek and maybe just some commentary back about where we are and what does it look like that could inform. I think I think the budget's going to be a challenging conversation this year, so that the sooner we can see some numbers and know what we're looking at, probably the better conversations we can have. So if the 8th does work as that high level report out, and then the first read on Tom's schedule would be the 15th, does that work for the board division? Is that acceptable, or is that not really what you'd prefer to do, or you want to get back to us?
Well, I think either way we have to get back to you, because I don't know that we can make that call on our own. But I think just procedurally, we usually do it school board votes first. So what you're just saying, just to confirm, is the 8th would be the presentation, the 9th would be the special meeting for the school board where we would vote on first budget. The town council would do first budget reading on the 15th, public hearing on the 16th.
So
Is
that
that
would,
correct?
that would preserve the order of things that we were sort of trying to.
Right. Then we would catch up with the timeline, right?
Right, it catches up and it puts us, presumably we can finish out the calendar as we've prepared it already. It kind of catches us up, if you will.
It catches us up, Tom, but on the finance committee side, we'd have to either cut back, we lose a week of reviews, right? In that.
Yeah, or the other thing you do is push the second
Yep.
reading back, another week in May, if you feel as though the finance committee needs more time. But that's at the expense of the absentee period, which might end up being pretty important this year if folks aren't able to actually come to the polls.
And I think I heard from you, Tom, that by the time we see it as a finance committee, you're gonna already have done a lot of heavy lifting, I think. And
that's my goal.
Yeah. So
Tom, is June 9th locked in? Is there a rationale that June 9th needs to be the date for the referendum, or is that flexible as well?
I think we try to pair up. You can do the validation anytime you want. You can call a special meeting. We try to align it with the primary. That's we're already there for other election purposes. And so we've always used that date, and that's traditional in this day and age of validation vote requirements. But nothing requires it other than needing to have a vote by the end of June.
I think that's a really good point that John is making, because one thing we know for sure is we are not business as usual right now, and retirees have lost anywhere between 30 to 50 to 60% of their retirement investments, probably impacting a number of us, even on the call. People are going to be unemployed. We don't know how quickly the economy is going to be able to recover from that. So, I think one of the dangers that we have is that, we need to be acknowledging this and also be prepared to have a bare bones budget if that's what it's coming to, and acknowledge that perhaps we're working on that as well. I would love to think everything is just going to turn out great, and I hope it does. I have a lot of hope and optimism, but I think we've got to be very sensitive to what people are going through now, and start acknowledging that this may not be a normal year. And to John's point, if we need a little more time for the budget referendum, that may be one way to get us a little more time to figure out what's going on here.
Also say the secondary reason that we typically pick that second Tuesday in June is that more often than not, Scarborough tends to need a second validation vote. And so that gives us time to scramble and put another question out before the end of June. Again, there are provisions to work around that, but that's the other historical motivation for doing it on that primary date.
Yeah, and this is Peter. The only concern I'd have by having two votes in June would be if the virus is still around, I think it's going to be tough to get people out twice to public spaces. I think that's a tough one. I think we got one shot. I mean, I think, Tom, on the finance committee side, if you do the heavy lifting, I think we can either extend an hour on some of the sessions we do have,
Mhm.
or I suspect we won't need to see every department as we have done in other years, and there'll probably be a couple of departments we know will want to look at: public safety, public works, the school, probably the library this year, because, you know, the other issue will be, you know, what's in their capital improvement budget.
Mhm.
So I think that 1 week at a time, if we could do it, however we do it, would make some sense. If we need to push it out a week, we can. I think the Board of Education, you know, maybe we could leave the schedule tentatively as is, but if we need to do both the presentation and the first read, the 15th, that would be an option too, right, Tom?
It would. It would. I was just trying to respect the
Yeah.
interest in separating the two.
So I think, you know, as you go back, as the Board of Education goes back and you figure out what works best for your team and where you are, you know, it would be great if we could preserve the April 8th just presentation, but if we need to combine it to the 15th, that would probably be workable. What does everybody else think about that?
Sorry, Peter, when you say leave it as is, can you just confirm what you mean by that? Because there was a couple options thrown out.
Yeah, I mean, I think as is, the way I was referencing it was, as Tom has proposed, push everything out a week, but it would be an April 8th, just that initial presentation at a very high level of both the school and municipal budget, and then come back on April 15th, which would again, did any changes or anything that had changed in the budget would be presented, and then we would do a first read that evening.
Yeah.
That's what Tom.
And then, so yeah, the BOE first. The only thing missing from that is just the BOE special meeting would be on the 9th. But yeah, that's I think what we had talked about, right, Kate and
Yeah.
Diane?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think that, again, that preserves the board action prior to the town council's first reading. And it, you know, it gets us those workshops. I think what happens to us is if we delay our workshops, then we might be having them the same week as that special meeting, which would make a busy week for us. But, you know, that's certainly doable.
Mhm.
And then I guess I guess the other option on the table is, you did say you needed to kind of go back and check with the rest of the board. If the other option would be, if that's not workable with the April 8th presentation, is collapse everything into the evening of the 15th. So it'd be the first time the budgets were presented, and it would be the first read.
Yeah, selfishly, I'd like to know sooner than later, just so I have a target date to work toward. So I don't know how long the Board of Ed needs to state its preference in that regard. I guess if we don't get clear guidance, I'm going to work toward the 8th as being the presentation. And if it ends up being the 15th, all the better for me. But
I'm worried about that as well, because we don't have a meeting. So I'm not sure how we'll convene the meeting and give you notice in enough time. Do you have a plan for that, Sarah?
Well, I mean, we're just talking about schedule, right? It's not necessarily a board vote, so I think we're safe to conduct that over email. Is that fair?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's a matter of scheduling at this point. And again, we just need to know that we would have enough board members for a quorum for those workshops.
Yeah.
So
And so then, go ahead, Tom.
I was going to suggest perhaps you could kind of publish this revised schedule out to the board to say this is what we collectively came up with.
Sure.
Seek their input. If there's great concern and objection, then it'd be great to know that sooner than later. But I hope that
Yep.
everyone will appreciate where we're at and will do what they can to accommodate the circumstance.
Yeah, so I think just we can do it. Sorry, Diane, go ahead.
I just said flexibility is the word of the day. That's where we've all been operating in the past 2 weeks. So I'm sure that we can put our heads together and make something that will work.
Yeah, Diane, I'm happy to send a note to the board. I think what would be helpful is if I could get some proposals in terms of dates and times for the workshops, so we can just get like all that information out to the board at once and see who's available. So if you
I
and
agree
Sandy
with
could
that.
try and get that.
Yep.
Okay, so cool.
Yeah,
So
I
if you and Sandy could get that to us, we can, I think tomorrow, Tom, assuming everyone's available to look at their calendars, we should be able to nail this down.
Yeah, and I intend to do the same, to publish out, we just have 3 of 7 counselors here too. So, my intent was if there was some direction out of today, we would put together a communication out of the full council to advise and seek flexibility, as Diane says.
I think on our side too, Tom, I'm sure John and Betsy, will, as soon as the materials are available, I'm sure they'll want to spend some real quality time looking at the numbers and going through it. But yeah, the time pressures and everything else are going to be a challenge as we move through all of this.
Yep.
And the other thing we want to make sure is that we're giving ample public opportunity for public input into the process, and that's going to be a challenge this year. I know we're not going to be able to host some of the outreach sessions that we would normally do. So I would tend to try to err on the side of what Tom presented, where even though there's some risk that the school budget may change between the 8th and the 15th because the school board might decide to make some amendments at first read, I think it's still worth probably having that presentation, because that's one of what will be not many views that the public has into the budget. And then do it again on the 15th with a budget that has been stamped by at least at first read, by the school board. So I think what's been presented is pretty solid. And if some things need to shift to the 15th, and then that's what needs to happen. But
Well, and we can all bear in mind that we are talking about the kickoff for a first reading, and that there will be lots of things that will change between first and second reading anyway. So, we don't have to feel worried about presenting a finished product because it's not finished by its nature.
great point.
And if you'll just excuse me a second, I'm going to stop sharing this agenda. I'm going to check on, see if there's any sort of public comment coming in. So,
Okay.
There you go.
There we all are.
Oh, excuse me.
Get to learn everybody's ringtones now.
Yeah. There's so many devices going. You got to remember which ones are on and which ones aren't. So with that, it sounds, do we have consensus then? We're going to kind of go as Tom has proposed, unless we hear something back in the next 24 hours or so?
People leaving comments on YouTube. So.
I think what I heard Sarah say was that that she would be back in touch with Tom within 24 hours, so that we have the opportunity to just get that commitment from the rest of the board,
Great.
if the council is willing to entertain that.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, we're just trying to be really conscious of the leadership council's time, given all the other priorities they have going on. So we want to just check with them first, and then we can confirm.
Yep, that's great.
Thank you.
That's great.
So the other part, Peter, I don't know if it requires any specific discussion. I think you need to see the budget to know what your priorities are. But my simple advice is I think you should prioritize your review. I think myself and staff are prepared to spend time individually with finance committee members or council members for that matter to understand details of the budget that we just don't have time or a public forum to review. But the finance committee as a group, if you could really focus your attention on those handful of departments, is probably the best way to use your time.
Yeah, I agree. And Tom, at this point, you've probably seen, you've seen all the submissions, right?
Oh, yes.
Which ones, usually we focus in on ones that have unusual changes or requests or needs, or ones that there's something unusual going on. Mm-hmm. You probably have a good sense of which ones those are at this point.
Yeah, I still have red pen in hand, so I haven't completed the full review, but yeah, it'll be the heavy hitters. It'll be public safety, public works. Frankly, I don't anticipate many, if any, new investments, maybe one new position.
Yeah.
So my goal is that it's going to be a fairly austere budget out of the gate. But inevitably, you may want to have questions, and frankly, some of my staff may want to have an audience with you as well to talk about the fact that there's need, but we've not advanced their priority at this point. So I think we'll know that once you get the document in your hands, you're able to spend a little time with it, and maybe your first meeting as a finance committee can really be that initial discussion to prioritize how you want to spend your time.
Yeah, so I mean, as you go through it, you know, we've got 3 slots, right? For our finance committee meeting review of the budget. I think.
Yeah, you have 5 weeks to work with, so I think we could probably double up. You know, you could make it more than 3 if you wish. We're trying to pace it, that's good, but we can do multiple meetings each week if that serves your need too.
Yeah, so I mean, did I hear you? You're kind of asking for an indicator now?
No, I don't think that's fair. I think you need to see the budget to know
Okay.
what you want to focus on. I'm just kind of preparing, setting the table for that discussion to come.
So maybe John and Betsy, when we'll probably see something on the 8th as we're talking. That's when you're going to hand out the budget books, Tom, you thought?
Yeah, it might be a virtual handoff, but yes.
So Betsy and John, I guess, you know, what Tom's asking, I think, is as you look through those materials, as you see budgets that you think you'd want to have some questions and answers and conversation about, we can huddle and let Tom know. Tom, I think in the past, you also have had department heads that like coming and talking to us.
Sure.
Or like the opportunity.
Yeah, particularly those that have some budget requests that hasn't passed my desk. I'd like to give them an opportunity to, you know, those needs don't often go away. So it's important that we have that conversation so you're aware of the need. And more times than not, I've been impressed that the finance committee's actually gone ahead and funded many of those items.
Yes. So maybe leave some room in the schedule for those, if there are those circumstances that they want to have the ability to have a conversation with us. I think that's appropriate.
Good. Thank you.
Peter, just, you know, from thinking about it a little bit, I'll probably have some interest in public safety, police and fire, because the transition to the new building, there's going to be a lot of shifts. So I think that's something that we'll probably want to create some extra focus on. Aside from that, nothing really jumps out at me as being something on the surface that I want to look at any closer than anything else.
The one thing that I've learned in all my years doing this is that there's a huge educational component of budget. So those members that serve on a finance committee, it's an opportunity to ask questions that maybe have always been on your mind, and everything's in front of you. And so I worry about losing that opportunity somewhat this year because of the circumstance. But I think there's opportunity for more one-on-one collaboration. If there are particular questions around something, we can make that happen just for the educational value.
Yeah, John, I think in the past, it's always been, we've always pretty much always done, you know, public safety, always done public works, because a lot of the capital projects, we've spent a lot of time with community services just because it's a complex sort of matrix of things that are going on. Tom, what else is usually bubbles up? The library wants an audience, and especially because of the expansion that they're proposing, I'm sure they're going to want to have a conversation.
Yeah, there's no surprises from an operational point of view there, but the capital piece is a huge conversation piece for sure. I have a lot of uncertainty as I think about what the future is going to hold, whether it's childcare, whether we're going to be in a position to need childcare in this community, or how are our beaches going to be used and what that means for revenues. I won't have all those answers, and that's going to be something, you know, we're going to have to talk about as a group and to make our best estimates.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a subject for today, but I mean, the whole issue about timing of referendums now, if we're still, I think people are still going to be still recovering from all of this by November. So I don't know but that's a different conversation for a different day on timing.
Right.
So anything else on this conversation? Everybody comfortable? Betsy, John, you guys comfortable?
I am, yeah. Nice job.
Betsy, you okay?
Yep.
And April, Sarah, and Alicia, you guys are sort of okay with sort of where we vectored to?
Good, Peter. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, a lot of fun's going to be ahead, huh?
So Tristan, are you prepared to read aloud the public comment?
Yeah, so we do have one that's come in. This is, I believe they're actual members of the town council here. So Don Hamill joined in the YouTube chat.
Hi, Don.
This is Vice Chair Town Council, resides in Pine Point. And he's saying, when will the budget goals for first and second readings be developed by Finance Committee and confirmed by the Town Council?
I can take a stab at it. I mean, I think, and it's part of another conversation. We had established those goals. I think we all kind of we'd vectored and we agreed to where we were hoping the budget presentation, the first read would arrive at. I think those have been published, and I think, Don, it's really sort of an outgrowth of some of the work that you've done on the Finance Committee. I think the issue Betsy's raising and the issue that we need to think about is, since those goals were developed, that we are in a completely different universe, and what is that going to mean? So I think that's why getting those numbers in the first look at the budgets early will let us know where it is. But I think to answer Don's question, I think those goals are what we established to begin with. That's where I think we want to get to at the first read. I think once we see the numbers and see where we are, we can then have a conversation about, what is the community ready for and ability to pay with we'll know much better about, are people back to work or not back to work? Are there going to be unemployment benefits and benefits from the federal or state governments to help folks get by? So I think that's sort of where we are. Anybody else have any response to Don?
Well, I don't think we intend to meet again and take action to adopt a recommendation for the council prior to the schedule that we just talked about. So whatever came out in the past, I guess, is probably the guiding principle, and plus the town council. The goal that we did stamp was the 3%. So that's kind of what Tom's using as a guide. In addition to, he's aware of everything else that's going on. So
Yeah,
as well.
I am working under the premise that there's actually a first reading goal as well. This is the work that Sarah helped champion last fall. And I think Kate's well aware of that as well. I've heard her repeat it. So we're working on kind of that two-step goal. So I think we have clear guidance. Beyond that, there's other circumstances that I think need to be taken into consideration now. But I think staff's well aware of what those goals are.
Well, I'll just repeat what I said. I think, we need to be looking at two levels here, bare bones and then, business as usual. Not that we ever spend ever, but we could be in really extraordinary times. We don't know. So I guess I'm not just comfortable saying, well, we're going forward with the budget goals that we had. So I don't think that we should meet right now and try to set new ones, but I do think that we need to plan some contingency budgets, plan around excise tax going way down, people not being able to pay their property taxes. I think we need to be thinking ahead as the weeks go forward. Hopefully the picture will get a lot more clear within the next, couple of weeks, and that won't be necessary. But as we go forward, I think we need to acknowledge it so that our residents feel and understand that we are acknowledging it and we're looking at it. So that's where I stand.
Anybody else? Yeah, Betsy.
I don't know if you're really looking for a comment from the BOE, but I guess just to chime in, I think that there's an opportunity, whether it's a joint statement or just a town council and board statement separately, to put something out to the public just to let them know sort of how we're handling this, and to kind of bear with us and know that everyone's trying their hardest, but it may mean some changes either to the process, to the schedule, or just to the budget itself. And it's just recognition of that could go a long way.
Yeah.
Totally agree with that, Sarah, because I think people are getting a little bit nervous and stressed that they feel like we're just continuing business as usual, but we're meeting remotely. So
Right.
I do think, and I did, personally post, I mean, I think, administration is doing a fabulous job. I'm so grateful for how everything is going. But I think more communication and having people understand that we are recognizing this, and we can't over communicate, I think, because that's what people need to hear right now. I know, Tristan, just really quick, I don't know if you were going to back up. Don had comments before the one that you read, so I'm not sure if you were preparing to look at Don's to go through Don's other comments that were above the one that you read.
Yeah, I was going to let the panel here go through topic by topic because it sounded like there was another topic in there that Don wanted to address, and then also some additional ones. But if you want to go ahead and field I think the one about delaying due to COVID that he brought up, I would definitely encourage you to bring that up if it makes sense in the current discussion here.
So do you want to read that?
Yeah.
I mean, he had one before that too. How does the proposed budget calendar compare to last year's? That was one of his questions.
Yeah, so I'll hit them here.
Actually, Tristan and Betsy, before we move off of this one, I think Sarah made a great suggestion about some type of joint communication going out, just saying where we are. What's the best way? Should it be the two chairs of the respective bodies that collaborate on that? What does everybody? I think it's a great idea to just get that out there. Tom, you have any suggestions on what you think?
I'm just reminding myself that we're only about 8 days into this, and it's changing very quickly. So what that message is, I'm not quite sure, just because things are so dynamic. In my mind, I was thinking that we need to do some messaging around this whole virtual platform that we're going to be using to start educating people on how to use it and be productive with it. But I don't disagree with the point whatsoever. We just need to, I don't know what that message is yet. I'm just being totally honest at this point.
Okay. Well,
I mean, Ed is, April is the sort of our chair of our comms committee. So I don't know if April, you have a feedback, and I guess Tom, I agree with your point that it's so fluid and changing. I think just acknowledgement of that and asking people's patience and bearing with us is pretty critical.
No, that's an excellent point. We don't have all the answers because we don't know what we're confronted with entirely, but just a recognition would go a long way. I appreciate that.
And then two, I just wanted to clear up, I think, and to be succinct about Don's question about goals, I think where we are, what I heard everybody say, both finance committees back in the fall, we spent a lot of time last summer working on goals. We have both mutually agreed that those goals are going to be what we shoot for at the first reading. I think we're saying we're sort of on that pathway to do that. And I think, to get to Betsy's point, once we get there and we see what the numbers are, given all the variables that we have, then we will have conversations about where we go from there. So I think if that makes any sense, and that closes out Don's question. So now, Tristan, I think he had a second question.
Yeah. So the other one here from Don. Is there any discussion about possibly postponing the budget process completely until we have a better handle on the extent of the COVID-19 crisis and its impact on our fiscal standing?
And I guess, Tom, I'll look to you a little bit. I mean, it's sort of, we had that conversation sort of at the top of the conversation, meaning if we postpone and don't do anything, then we think the current budgets roll over into next year?
I'm not going to hazard a guess. I don't know what happens in that scenario. But my point is we don't need to be there. I think there is a way to effectively move this process forward and logically and systematically. So I would discourage us from just hitting the pause button. Now more than ever, and it looks as though the response is going to continue to be driven at state and local level. You know, we need to be in a position to provide services that our community needs. And we're still trying to understand what those are. Those are going to probably change somewhat. So in my view, I don't see that as a viable option. I think we need to be very thoughtful going forward. And excellent points have been raised, but I don't see that as a scenario that I'd like to spend much time thinking about.
Yeah, Peter, from my perspective, I think we need to lead and react to the situation that we're presented with, and not just kind of hide for a couple of months. I think that would probably do more to contribute to a downward spiral. I think we need to show that, yeah, life's going to go on. We're going to keep moving. And I think it's important to do that, even though we're going to fumble along and have to figure some things out along the way.
That's great. Anybody else? Any else want to share sort of any perspectives on Don's question? Okay. So I guess with that, there's a third question potentially?
There's a lot of comments and questions. I guess, Tristan, maybe you're editing. Jean Marie is on. She has a number of comments and questions. So I'm not sure how we want to do this going forward. I thought we said at the beginning of the meeting that we were just going to take what people are saying and actually read everything that they've put in. So
Betsy, just please appreciate Tristan's trying to be patient and allow the body to have conversation around each comment. So the intention is to go through them one by one. We're not going to overlook any of them.
okay.
And so sort of to speak to that, I think, Tom, you had mentioned something at the top of this about, you know, this being a maiden voyage and, you know, not everyone was invited to the Zoom meeting, but there seems to be a couple town council members that are bringing up the fact that they would have appreciated an invite, or would they be invited on future meetings into Zoom itself without having to go through the YouTube public option here.
Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing feedback. We did speak to that earlier. That was an oversight on my part. In my haste to arrange the meeting, I just focused on the active participants and staff support. But that's easy enough to invite the full council and Board of Ed if that's of value and interest.
Yeah, and that was Jean Marie, Katerina, and also Betsy Glaystein had brought that up. So they wanted to make
I'm
sure.
actually on a meeting, so just letting Jean Marie know that
okay.
people had requested that are on this committee. Yeah, and Don was requesting it as well. I'm all in favor of it because it is such unprecedented times, and you know, to hear from, you know, my fellow elected officials, you know, I'm sure they'll respect the committee process because, you know, in person they can always come to our committee meetings. It would be great if we could let the whole public on, but that may not be practical. But yeah, I'm definitely in support for these committee meetings for the finance committee that go forward, of inviting all the elected officials if they want to attend.
I agree, Betsy.
I'm sorry, John, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I agree with Betsy. I think, you know, all elected officials should be invited.
Oh, there was some prior emails. I totally agree. I think it was just, you know, all of our committee meetings are open to any town council members. I think it was, you know, as Tom had suggested, this is a learning curve for all of us. So it wasn't intentional. We certainly, you know, will be open to all elected officials. So I think that's.
Yeah, I would just like to add, absolutely. I mean, this is a great job. You guys have done a great job. So it was no criticism whatsoever. This is, I mean, I think the YouTube thing, you know, works well. That's awesome. So I think, you know, everyone's done a great job. I would just add, the BOE, they're going to be very busy. They're going to have their own budget they're working through. So they probably won't attend, but I personally would include them in the invitation of our meetings, so that if they want to attend, they can.
Betsy, you made an excellent point earlier. I think to do so, it's incumbent on all non-committee members to respect the fact that there is a committee that needs to function. So my only cautionary note is that it gets to be unwieldy and the committee actually gets diluted through that process. But I think if everyone recognizes that, it will work fine.
Great.
Anything else, Tristan?
I believe that's it. So it just, again, there was a lot of concern about having folks getting access, but you've definitely spoken to that.
So Tristan, Don had one more question at the very beginning. How does the proposed budget calendar compare to last year's? Can you speak to that, Tom?
Sure. It's almost an exact replica. Again, the constraints this year from a scheduling and calendar point of view are no different than they've been in the past. Colette and Kate, I don't think we're a week off from last year. Maybe just a few days. Is that true?
Yeah, the only places where we diverged was because of the way that the calendar runs. Sometimes the first Wednesday isn't the same date as the first Wednesday in the next year. And because it was a leap year, we did kind of push things a little bit, but it really was an attempt to replicate exactly what we did last year and the year prior.
Great.
Yeah, we always start 1st of April, so to speak, and end up at the second meeting in May and preparing for that June vote.
Right.
Anything else, Tristan? Is that
That seems to be the last question that I have listed here, going all the way back. Yeah, and Don would also just like to point out that he was asking if there's anybody actually from the public, since it seems most folks are submitting questions are actually from the town council. But no, it doesn't look like they're actually from the public, or they can't be spoken for. So.
Can you see if there's any public on? Is there an audience on YouTube?
Yes, we have right now 16 folks, but there's no way to tell without them commenting who they are.
Okay, great. So,
yeah.
Okay.
But 16 total, and the peak was 19.
The irony of this process is we may well have more participants, at least folks tuning in and hearing the discussion, than you do under normal circumstance.
Yeah, I was going to say, for our finance committee meetings, I can't remember when we had 16 people.
Oh, excuse me. Hold on. Jean Marie Katerina is asking, when does the budget clock start?
Well, we spent an hour talking about that. Either April 8th or April 15th. We'll know within the next 24 hours.
Okay. So I guess with that, as we've moved down through the agenda, that was item 4, the public comment. Anybody else have anything, any questions or anything else you'd like to contribute?
Just housekeeping.
Yep.
Traditionally Colette spends the last week leading up to presentation binding books that you all get a copy of, a hard copy. Is everyone going to be okay with a digital copy this year?
That's fine with me. Please don't print one for me, actually.
Okay.
As long
Yeah,
as
I think that's okay.
the only thing that for the public, last year you did a great job. I think you had some type of deal with Staples or something, so that people that if they wanted the printed copy, you can make arrangements to get it.
Sure, we can make that again.
Great. I know there'll be some people that will want the binder.
Yep.
But if there's still a way that folks can get access to it and have it printed at a reasonable cost, I think you negotiated some special deal, or it was cheaper than they could have done it probably on their own. So,
Larissa, can you speak to that in the electronic copy?
Certainly. So I don't think it was a cheaper deal, but it just made it easier for them. The Staples knew that people would be coming in. And we were able to let them know what the cost would be before they arrived, so they could make that decision for themselves if they wanted to go in. There will be, my intention at least, is that we will have the same as we did last year, the full on budget, and then the 2 slices of the budget light and the budget medium. Still no more creative name for that than what we have, I apologize. And those will be up in the budget portal. So council will, we'll certainly send you a direct copy, but you'll also have those shorter versions if you wanted to kind of just skim through some things in between deep reads. You'll have access to those on those public forum as well.
Great. Thank you.
So Peter, I do have one more logistical question. So if this were live, we would be recorded on SCTV and then it would be posted. Is this now, it's going to be some type of a Zoom document posted? How's that going to work?
Tristan can answer that.
Yep. So essentially what's going to happen is it's being live streamed on YouTube with a little bit of a delay. And then essentially it goes into an archive. It is then posted on the same channel that streams the content. So basically if the channel is streaming, you get a live notification that says this is happening currently. And then there will be videos and playlists that group the associated Zoom conferences or meetings, depending on what the nature of the meeting is. So they will be available to the public recorded just as they are now.
So finding stuff on our website isn't always the easiest. So where can people go if they want to click something and watch this?
So on the, I believe on the agenda, there's actually a link at the very top that says YouTube link for public viewing. That would be that's the same channel. It's all the same link that would allow you to view the meetings. So they're by default listed by recency. So the most recent one's on top, and then you can scroll through. And then additionally, there will be different playlists that have groups for the different meetings.
So Betsy, we can make sure to put out onto all of the channels that we would normally put out to let people know how to find things. We can set up just, some sort of folder or something that says, not a folder. We can put out the link to the YouTube channel that Tristan was just describing, and people will be able to find all of the archives there. And then also on the budget portal, we can make sure that we're linking people directly to the meetings that have taken place where the budget has been discussed, so that people have access to it in multiple locations.
Okay, yeah, because that's going to be different, right? Because normally you would go to the town council page and then go to committees and scroll down to finance page. We'd see the agenda, and then right next to it would be the button to click the recording.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like that's not, people are going to need to open the agenda to be able to know. It doesn't sound like the button would be there.
Well,
no,
can we?
It will be.
Yeah, I think that if that can be linked to the channel, it can probably be linked to the YouTube channel as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to get it as similar to what people are used to as possible. Because
Yeah, they could put a link to on that council committees page as well.
Yes, so that
It
link
usually does that.
That link would be specific to this meeting. So like we've organized things in the past, there'll be the agenda and meeting materials, and there's a link to the meeting. So I don't see any different. It'll just be a different link to a YouTube location.
There you go.
Right, where
so,
it says video
if you-
stream, it would be plugged in there.
Yeah, if you take a look, this is the council committee's page here, and this YouTube link, this will essentially bring you to all of the meetings, all the virtual meetings that are archived. So if there is one live, it will indicate that. It'll say there's one live currently, but if there isn't, it'll give you a list of all the videos and all the different meetings that are available. So that's on the site right now.
So what I'm talking about, that's great. And maybe that's all, but I'm talking about over on the right where you see video stream under multimedia. Is
Yep.
there going to be video stream for this meeting under that column?
Oh, I see, to keep it sort of in the same
Consistent.
format so that okay. Yeah, we can definitely look into getting that posted, like a direct link for the March 23rd meeting instead of, yeah, that can definitely be
Okay,
taken care of.
awesome. Thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
Listen,
we
you should
have-
know, we've been trying to get YouTube for quite some time, so this is fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And as we
Great.
build more and more archive, we will organize the YouTube channel that is, I think it's generically called Scarborough Maine Public Meetings at this point. We can change it to something else. But as you have council meetings and Board of Ed and all of your different committees, I believe we'll be able to set it up and organize it in such a way that if someone wanted to look through them all, they could do it by group, if you will.
That's great.
So as we close out, you guys, yeah, kudos to you. This was seamless. It worked well. I wasn't quite sure what the maiden voyage would be like. Actually, I think it works pretty well. So, I was really nervous that it would be really tough conducting business and doing things, but this seems to work pretty well. So thank you. If any of us have questions or comments for improvements, Tom, should it go to Tristan or you, or what's the best?
You can send them to me and I'll make sure IT gets them. But let's get used to it. This is the new normal for a while.
Yeah. So if anybody has any feedback for Tom about this, let him know, because if we keep dialing this in, by the time we get to the end of the process, it might be pretty effective. So
Right. As long as we can hear, I mean, obviously we have to do what we have to do right now, but there's nothing like hearing someone's voice from the public as well. I mean, Jean Marie is kind of saying, she's actually used Zoom quite a bit, and there may be ways for people to, be able to speak on their own. So, I mean,
Instead of
as we
typing in.
get going on this, that, can't just be us at some point, but we'll figure it out. Great job, everyone.
Somehow we need a 3-minute timer.
Peter.
Countdown. All right. Well,
All right, thank you all. Thanks for your patience.
Peter, we need a roll call vote before we adjourn. So maybe it'll be a motion, I'll motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor, we need a roll call, huh? Or just raise your hand.
No, roll call.
Roll call.
Oh, to adjourn? Okay. Thanks, John. Oh, I'm going to do the roll call?
You
Okay.
need somebody else to do the roll call. You guys can't do your own roll call. I'll call it for you. Counselor Hayes.
Yes. To adjourn.
Counselor Clucci.
Yes.
Counselor Glaystein.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
We are adjourned. Thank you.
Woo!
Thank
Be
you,
safe.
everyone.
Thanks for your
Thanks,
patience.
guys.
All right, be safe, guys.
See ya. Thank you.